So for this installment of our webinar series, Coffee with Cal, today we're pleased and excited to be speaking with three thought leaders in the crowdsourcing space. Epi Ludwig from Crowdsourcing Week, Dave Messenger from TopCoder, and Christian Caracini from our very own HeroX team. Thanks for all three of you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Let's make this fun.
Yeah, of course. It's one of the ground rules.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be chatting a bit about what the power of crowdsourcing has given us in the past decade, but also what's possible for us for the next 10 years that are coming up. All right, so let's get started with some introductions that can get us kicked off. My name, as I mentioned, is Cal Sahota. My role with the team at HeroX is the VP of Possibilities, which I have it is the best job in the world. I have the absolute pleasure of connecting with organizations all over the globe, speaking to them about their innovation strategies, how to implement crowd as a key component of that strategy. Now, my background is very much traditional business, 25 years in financial services, from an advisor to leadership roles. Our team at HeroX is virtual, but I'm physically located in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. And it is, well, it's not beautiful, but at least it's not raining today. Not quite my neighbor, but in fairly close proximity, probably a little bit closer than he'd like. Christian, over to you. How about a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Cal. So my name is Christian Caracini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HeroX, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Good stuff. Dave, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Dave Messenger, CTO for TopCoder. I've been doing crowdsourcing for almost 18 years now. TopCoder was started about 2001. So it's been a long journey from people thinking we were completely out of our mind to people just slightly think we're out of our mind now. So gotten a little bit better over time. And I am in Connecticut, which is pretty chilly, but as you may be not surprised, I'm originally from Boston, so you might hear a little bit of an accent.
Well, if you're dropping the R's, we know. Ka, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so last but certainly not least, Epi, share a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Well, thanks for having me, Cal, and this is really exciting. So my background comes from advertising world, and that's how I got into crowdsourcing. And so about 12 years, not as many years as you, Dave, but certainly starting crowdsourcing in advertising world, and then Crowdsourcing Week started about 7 years ago. This is where we really established out of Singapore, and then from here we've gone all over the world doing a bunch of events and primarily focused around the content and how we can really power organizations and individuals with crowdsourcing as a technique or as a practice to really do things in a different way, efficient way, and of course, finding a great results that we're looking for. So really excited for this, and yeah, still being passionate in this space is very important. So let's bring that passion forward. So
love it. All right, gentlemen. So some quick ground rules. Epi, you've already touched on this already a little bit. So authenticity, pushing the boundaries, being bold, audacious, feeling free to speak out of turn and comment on one another's points. It's all good. Maybe a bit of comedy here and there. You guys game?
yes.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's jump into our first question. A great place to start. Why did you choose to go into crowdsourcing? There has to be a journey or a story in there somewhere. Dave, let's get started with you.
Sure. So I guess we started back in crowdsourcing was I worked for a software consultancy, and you can imagine we grew pretty fast, especially with the dot-com boom hit. So we grew from like 600 to 500 people. And I'd say we were really good, but by the time you're hiring the 501st person, it became a little bit difficult. It was, here's a book of Java, hide it under your desk, read it, and we'll bill you out at the client. And we figured that had to be a better way to find talent, recognize talent. So then it was like, how do we recognize, reward, and have a true meritocracy around finding the right people and connecting that talent with people? So that was kind of what drove us at the beginning to start TopCoder. And what still today I think even excites me the most is how to connect the talent with people that need to use that talent.
That's a great story. Epi, you want to jump in next?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, as I mentioned, I was running the advertising, the boutique advertising agency in New York, and my first, when I come across to crowdsourcing was quite a very interesting because I only was focused on the marketing world. But then when I started really going deeper, I found that, oh my God, this is much bigger. So here we go. In 2012 is where I started Crowdsourcing Week. And then in 2013, I decided to establish this out of Singapore. So that's how I ended up being here in Singapore. Then from here, we've gone all over the world, as I mentioned. But when I look at the whole space, it's still, I would say, in a very infant stage, given that we see so many organizations that have not really embraced not one even single project. And so that really tells me a lot. There's still a lot more work to do. And I'm really excited for this conversation because we're going to learn here together and share some of the data that we find here from the past experience that we have. So
that's great. Thanks, Epi. Rounding it off with Christian.
Yeah, so my story is a bit different. Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for, well, not quite 3 decades, but more than 2 decades. And, I love doing, creating disruptive innovation and using startups to do that. I've done 3 startups before this. And the last one, we sold to Dell when Dell was going private. And I had a chance to take some time off and go on a sabbatical, and which I highly recommend for busy people to do. And that gave me a chance to do a lot of really big thinking and kind of look at the world and think about what I wanted to tackle next. And it was really clear to me that, the internet has been amazing and it's changed the world in both good ways and bad ways. But we're still not using it to powerfully collaborate at scale. And, the world is dealing with a lot of problems. Companies are dealing with a lot of problems in the marketplaces, and they're still trying to solve most of their problems, if not all of their problems, either inside their building or using traditional means, which kind of reminds me of the old parable of the old man in the streetlight, I think, where he's looking for his keys under the light. And then, somebody bumps into him and says, well, where'd you last see them? Oh, over there in the dark part of the parking lot. So I think that, although people are slow to change, I think that using the internet to really leverage the collective talent of humanity is inevitable.
Yeah.
And will make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use it all day, every day, and leveraging it for good is and for taking things to the next level, really. All right, gentlemen. So when you look back over the past decade, what was the most inspiring crowdsourcing project that either you were a part of or that potentially you heard about, and why? And there's no specific order, so when you guys think of an example, jump in. If not, I'll start picking on you.
I can jump in because you guys come from a platform, and I really want to look at. And I'm not going to talk about your platform because you guys do a lot of great work out there, and I'll have you talk more about it. But basically, about 2 years ago, I came across to these woman of NASA, which is a creator that was a lady from the MIT News Labs. She was the deputy editor for MIT News Labs. She had a passion for these women of NASA who were pretty much challenging NASA back in the days for the astronauts. And so she brought that story alive through a Lego Ideas platform. Why this is so important is because that type of story would have been just buried there. But now it came alive to a toy, and Lego made it a real toy, so that was available everywhere. And now it's in the hands of the kids. So I think we have really huge opportunity here with crowdsourcing to also inspire people, not just also solving the problem, but also inspiring the generations to come. And here's one great story. Another one that I really liked was the when the discovery of the 5 exoplanets by citizen scientists through a project called Exoplanets Explorers, part of the online platform Zooniverse. That was using the data from NASA's Kepler Space Telescope. I think that was really amazing, the way how they really handled it. So I think these two really inspired me a lot to really keep pushing forward in years to come. So really excited about this.
That's great. Thanks, Epi.
Yeah.
Don't make me pick on you guys. Anybody else ready to jump in?
I can add one. One that we did on our platform, we actually did with Harvard Business School and Harvard Medical School, was around what was a tumor treatment planning for lung cancer. So you can imagine like that today, that's a very small set of doctors that actually look at the majority of lung cancer to x-rays to figure out how to do the treatment, how to plan for that. And we actually, in conjunction, built a AI platform through the crowd. So we had over close to 400 people participate in that challenge, but they came up with not only identification of the tumors, but a treatment path that, you know, took several years, but went through like the Journal of American Medicine, you know, and outperforming top doctors. So you could just imagine, you know, that's a huge impact. And that was something that was just done by people around the world, having the opportunity to see the data and participate in that. I mean, it's a huge, huge outcome that I know I'm personally very proud of.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, isn't it? I mean, something like healthcare, which is, I mean, truly global. It impacts absolutely everybody around the world. So any advances in that just literally makes an impact on the world. Christian, what about you?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of challenges. There's just no end of really great stories to share in a lot of different spaces. You know, one I'll talk about, which I haven't talked about in a while, is we did a project with the New York State Department of Health called the Aging Innovation Challenge, and they invited me to the finalist event. So they picked 6 finalist teams, and then they give them an opportunity to present in front of a group for kind of the final selection. And it was just really amazing, you know. So the challenge was about, you know, helping, you know, senior adults live independent lives, stay at home longer. And, you know, it was a really open category. And without going into, you know, details we don't have time for, you know, these 6 finalist ideas were all just so amazing and diverse. They were, you know, pitched, and in fact, they were so good that we ended up picking 2 teams that shared first place because we couldn't pick between them, and it was just so inspiring to see these ideas. And you know, the Department of Health is, of course, motivated to do this because of the huge financial burden that's going to come as, you know, the population ages, and New York State is kind of on the leading edge of the demographics. And so it was just amazing to see, you know, a lot of young innovators solving a problem because they were invited to participate. And you know, it just, to me, it demonstrates just the massive like bench of talent that crowdsourcing represents if you engage with it properly.
That's so well said. You know, I think for myself, I think that's the part that I find the most inspiring, is that as a world and as even as business organizations, we've opened ourselves up to be able to tap into that. And I mean, Christian, you know this, and Dave, I'm sure you do as well, just being around the whole platform environment, is so many times when organizations do run challenges that the results are so breathtaking that they're absolutely blown away. And we see this all the time. Like, you literally don't know what you don't know. And somebody from clear across the world could look at what it is that you're stuck on from an ever so slightly different perspective. And from that little different view can present you with an idea that you just absolutely would not have considered. I think that to me is the most powerful thing overall of crowdsourcing. And it's just amazing over the past decade how much the world has really started to embrace that. Really great answers, guys. So as you guys know, crowdsourcing has been around since the 1800s. Likely surprising to some of our audience, but it has actually been around for that long. So in the past decade, we've seen many crowdsourcing platforms emerge, HeroX, of course, being one of them. That said, it still doesn't occur as very mainstream, and it can still oftentimes be mistaken, believe it or not, for even crowdfunding. How do you see crowdsourcing and platforms evolving into the next decade? And Epi, you seem to have a bird's eye view just because of Crowdsourcing Week. Let's start with you first. What are your thoughts?
Well, next decade, well, it's hard to really figure out what the next decade is going to bring, given the fact that we're in a exponential growth and innovation side of things. But the way how I see the big shifts are going to enable some of these big shifts that we're seeing, the advancement on the machine learning and artificial intelligence, that's for sure. But also another thing that I really see that's really amazing, and I'm not sure when is the last time that you had those AR or VR experiences, but I'm telling you, like last year, I was able to do one of those in a couple of these different environments, and I'll tell you, those type of environments are really amazing. And once we have that advancement in AR, VR, that experience gets mainstream, this will allow us to join projects and the people and groups with a common interest within those actual spaces that we could not ever imagine how this workspace will look like. I mean, it'd be just incredible. And I think we're getting there. I've seen some news that, you know, Facebook and Apple that are working on those in these spaces, but we are just in the beginning of where the crowdsourcing can be integrated with technologies. And that is a real opportunity that I see it in the next 10 years of this decade.
Well said.
Yeah, I think just to pile on that, I think that's the most interesting is how does it, you know, I think AR, VR, meetings like Zoom, things like that. But even I think in like maybe a different version of human in the loop, but like humans in your tooling, I think is going to be a big spot. Like even today, you can go look at, I think Microsoft even has plugins now where you can get immediate help for someone to solve an Excel formula problem for you. Or you know, you can imagine pulling in developers into Visual Studio or pulling designers into PowerPoint. If your slides look anything like mine, you need something more than Smart Art to make them look nice, being able to pull a designer in to help there. But you could imagine, you know, almost anywhere being able to pull in external people right into, like, remove that friction of hopping out of your routine, going to find the person. You know, I think voice apps is another spot where that'll come in and help a lot.
Yeah, and just to add to that also, Dave, just recently the Microsoft research team, they were working on a few areas where now they can plug in the micro tasking into the Word document for the organizations and tapping into that cognitive surplus within the organizations that can really help bring an organization a much higher productivity. They call it like micro productivity effect. So it's really amazing. I read this article about a few months ago in Wired magazine, and it's really fascinating where this is going.
Christian, anything to add?
Well, Cal, I would like to phone a friend.
I'm sorry, that lifeline is no longer available to you, but that's okay.
You got friends.
Well, I was listening to the answers. They were great answers, but I forget what the question was.
So Christian of you.
I know.
Yeah.
So hit me.
So
otherwise, I'm going to go down a rat hole.
How do you see crowdsourcing and platforms evolving into the next decade?
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, so let me kind of cover it more, kind of more first principles based to can add value from those other great answers. So if you think about how the internet works in terms of mainstream adoption, um, it's almost always a platform that kind of makes something mainstream. So for example, the sharing economy, like in accommodations, for example, which is, by the way, is a form of crowdsourcing. Airbnb, kind of set the standard and created the platform that was mainstream ready. And that's kind of a necessary enabling step to anything to really create a new mainstream adoption cycle. AWS with cloud computing, it's like, what did they invent? If both Airbnb and AWS, what did they invent? Well, I mean, people were already doing web hosting and vacation rentals by owners and whatnot, all over the place, right? The trend of you don't have to own servers, web servers anymore, was already in full flight, although it was for the technical, it was for the early adopters. So platforms have this amazing ability to really make something mainstream. E-commerce, Amazon Prime and the Amazon platform, love it or hate it, in terms of it's cannibalizing everybody else in a way, almost a victim of its own success, but it's the same thing. It's perfected the e-commerce experience, and it's now set a standard that everybody else is set to. So although I'm not a believer in monopolies, and I believe that competition is really important, what the most important thing that these platforms do is they set a standard that everything is held to, and that standard is what draws the mainstream to it. And then there's this kind of solidification of the new practice. Uber is a great example for millennials and the younger generation of urban dwellers, many of which are like, well, I don't need to own a car now. Why would I buy a car? So needless to say, the car companies are freaking out, but they can call us and we can help them with innovation.
And they can call a friend if they want.
Yeah, just to follow on to that too. I mean, the other interesting thing is, like, if you think about like where 5G is going, and even like the power of the iPhone is, I think, they said, Maasai warrior tribe now has all iPhones, and you think about it, that's more computing power than what they said that launched the Apollo, right? Is that, that's the great equalization of these platforms is the access becomes everywhere. You'll be able to tap in and reach out to the world, becomes a whole lot smaller.
It's almost like a leading indicator of where the world wants to go, right? It's like things are being created out of need. So I see it all as a leading indicator, and
the power of the free market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can give thought to what we think the next decade is going to look like, but I'm pretty sure if we watched this webinar in 10 years, we'd be like, oh, I mean, there's just no way we could have imagined what's actually going to.
And when you look at, for example, like going to, let's say, into the financing side of things, the alternative financing, we saw the first rise in crowdfunding, right? And so looking into like what are the possibilities in this decade, it's like endless, given the fact now the capital is getting democratized, like what Peter Diamandis said, and I think it was like around like 300 billion in crowdfunding anticipating by 2025. This is massive.
Oh yeah.
It's like the opportunities, and you're looking at like real technologies and platforms now that are a lot more sophisticated than what we had in the first generation of a crowdsourced platforms, I would say. So
that's actually a really a nice little segue into another area that I was thinking of, and I'm sure all three of you, I'm going to go on the assumption, you can tell me you disagree with me if you'd like, but I'm going on the assumption that we all agree that crowdsourcing is a key and very necessary component of any open innovation strategy. Definitely. So that being said, so when you look ahead, not a decade, but when you look ahead maybe 12, maybe 18 months, what specific shifts do you see happening within the enterprise sector specifically in making crowdsourcing more scalable? And Whoever wants to can jump in first. Should I do the Jeopardy too?
I should jump in first because I'll forget the question if I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm disabled, so I get the special parking spot. So oh, I almost forgot the question just from that. Okay, so so I'm a bit of a student of adoption cycles. You know, being an entrepreneur for so long, I've had to sit and watch adoption cycles and how they go, and also old enough to have seen a lot of them, and as both successful ones and failed ones. I remember being excited about the Apple Newton.
Mm.
Do you you guys
Yeah.
seem wrinkled enough to remember the Apple Newton? But you'd be surprised. Like one of my pet peeves on stage talking to young people is they don't know the Apple Newton, they don't know who Snuffleupagus is, which really drives me nuts, but I won't go there. You know, the key thing is, you know, it's back to this mainstream adoption cycle that's really driven by platforms nowadays. But the real key thing is it's almost like there's this level of penetration in a market of the early adopters and enough of a clear signal. I think of it as signal to noise ratio that that there's a lot of consistent success. So we really focus at HeroX on the efficacy, the successful execution and completion and repeatability of our projects. You know, we don't even track profitability on our projects because we're going to put in whatever it takes for each project to really, I mean, we can't guarantee that the innovation is going to come, but we can guarantee that that we're going to give it a great chance and give it a great process and really work to make sure that talent gets attracted to the project. And so what we've been working on is really kind of creating a set of best practices, a body of knowledge that's really missing about crowdsourcing and open innovation, and then really sharing that with the world. So we're, you know, part of, you know, this webinar series and the content we're doing, the training that we're providing to consultants and partners is to really share the best practices so that, you know, it becomes as mainstream and as commonplace a way of thinking that makes crowdsourcing a success. And then finally, I'll say that a lot of it boils down to demographics. This is bad news for entrepreneurs because it basically, you know, if you know, you can even go through a lot of the big unicorns like Uber and Airbnb, they really correlate with demographics, right? You know, Uber, well, millennials needed to get around. You know, they were old enough to need to get around. You know, even Dropbox, right? Millennials were heading into college and, you know, like needed to deal with files and do like stuff, right? Airbnb, millennials wanted to travel. Tinder, I won't go there right now, but you get the idea.
Don't touch that.
Yeah. And, you know, it doesn't perfectly match, but it pretty closely matches that the demographic cycle. So I would almost argue, I mean, we're working hard to help bring the idea of crowdsourcing mainstream for the benefit of the entire industry and play our small part in it. But I would argue that it's like we're just waiting for the millennials to get promoted.
I 100% agree. I mean, that's what I think, that's what I always say. And Malcolm Gladwell just did, like, I saw him at Gartner Symposium as the keynote, and that was one of his big things was, unfortunately, you got to kind of wait for the age, the time of the technology, right? Like, it's just such a huge factor about who's using it. And I think, you know, even you can say the same thing happened in mobile, right? Enterprises tried to allow no phones in the enterprise. It was too big a risk. And people were like, I want my phone, I'm bringing it into the office.
Totally.
You know, how you travel, how you order your food late at night, how you get your car, people are just going to be used to that. And they're just going to want to be able to reach out and get the best product available. And you know, these people as they start to get promoted, it's going to become more and more common. I think the other interesting thing is, I think for once, government's kind of leading the way too. I think all of us have done some work with NASA
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
what NASA's doing, from even promoting the space, sharing their information, sharing their learnings, that's a great role model. And if NASA can do it, then pretty much anyone should be able to figure out how to do it at some point too, right? Like they got a lot of complex problems that enterprises and other companies could really learn from.
Yeah. I mean, government's
Hey,
got it. Yeah.
I'll double that. I mean, they literally have rocket scientists.
Yeah. Literally.
Think about that. Do you have rocket scientists? I don't think so. So if
Yeah.
they have rocket scientists, they still want to use the crowd.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And given the fact that, like a lot of times, like, you're talking to enterprise and they're like the legal team gets involved and like really here's the delay and that it never ends. And to that fact, you're talking about here's the government agency who's got that thing all set in place. And I think every organization is able to do that. Just the fact of the matter that the commitment that they're willing to make, right? To make it. I think it's a shift. And also like it's a paradigm shift, right? So we're talking about what the future of work. This is really future of work. We are really like through crowdsourcing, we're enabling this transfer of knowledge just going from places. And I think the where those needs are, where those problems need to be solved. And I think this is just the beginning. And kudos to all of us because we're really like in a frontier of this and taking it further and it's a lot of work to really bring this education forward. But I really agree with you, Christian, that we need that the new generation of leaders like they're coming in, these millennials, and I think that's the opportunity that we're seeing here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I was at an event in Silicon, I think it was last April, and it was a fairly intimate event. I think it was about 100 attendees, a lot of senior staff with innovation with a lot of the larger brands. And that's one of the biggest areas that they were finding that they got stuck is, they want to bring the idea of open innovation and innovation as a whole into the organization, but they were continuing to get stuck because the framework and the structure that's in place isn't conducive to this new approach. So you're jamming old school metrics into a new way of thinking. And when it comes out the other end, it doesn't work. And that's really, and who drives that? That is the leadership. And in fact, to your point, Christian, in fact, that was one of the things that I'm not going to say which brand stood on the stage and said, either we give these guys early retirement or we basically hang tight until, the newer generation takes on the leadership. So, yeah. So here's a really great question, which I have it that I think our audience will really appreciate some of your guys' thoughts and answers because they can show up as really great takeaways for them. What type of skills or resources, from your perspective, do you think are required in-house to successfully support crowdsourcing projects? So, you have platforms such as HeroX and TopCoder and Kaggle and all these other platforms. So they're there to support it, but what kind of support would a brand or an organization need to bring in-house, positions or resources? Take it however you guys want. And if you can name off 2 to 3 specific areas of talent, you get bonus points maybe. So what are your thoughts on that? That's a tough one. I'll give you guys
Oh, no, I've got a lot of thoughts, but I'm just giving room for somebody else to talk.
I can go ahead. I would name, like when I look at the people we work with that do a really good job, this is, I think listening is number one, like being able to kind of take feedback, listen to the crowd, understand what they want. I think that comes down to really too, like the other big thing I would say is like having the ability or the skills to like make decisions, like make calls. Like when you work with a crowd, you're going to get a plethora of feedback and comment questions. And the longer you sit around not answering that question, that you're not giving them the feedback, you're not giving them more info to move forward, then the crowd kind of gets bored, right? So you need to be able to kind of make those quick decisions, make the comments, help interact. So I think it's really comes down to like, collaboration is really the best skill. Like if you can collaborate, understand people, listen, help build that consensus and give good feedback. I think the only other one is have some thick skin too. You definitely hear a lot of positive and negative things when you work with a crowd of people.
Yeah, being willing to let things go. Yeah, for sure. Guys, what do you guys think?
I can jump in.
Go for it.
I'm trying to be very selective because this is, so I can think of 20 things. So I'll pick a couple that I haven't talked about in a while and are, I think, really not well understood. So one of them is, so we live in a world where, you know, there really isn't an ability for a company to, you know, to have this, you know, proactively shaped public persona and control the messaging there. In other words, the old model, I call it the Mad Men model, you know, is that we can shape the conversations that are happening outside the organization and shield the internal conversations. But if anybody doesn't think that's true, go to glassdoor.com. And if you're in business and you don't know about glassdoor.com, I'll send you a resignation letter template you can use. That's a joke. But look, you know, we live in a connected world. So it's a conversation, and the two conversations, the outside the company conversation, inside the conversation inside the company, are collapsing anyways, and you can't stop it. People are human beings and they talk, and now they can talk, you know, on things like Twitter in front of hundreds of millions of people. So the whole idea is, you know, rather than just be a victim of it, crowdsourcing is to leverage it as a capability. So it's kind of obvious, but that comes with a whole mindset shift, which is about empowerment over control, you know, and understanding that, yeah, you know, when you do crowdsourcing, just like any other type of work, failures will happen, you know, bad things will happen. But, you know, just look at a, you know, how a millennial or a Gen Z person, you know, goes through a discussion group, skipping all the trolls, you know, skipping all the insults that does, like, bounces off them like water off a duck's back. You know, we just live by a different set of rules beyond the scope of today. But the point is, it's inevitable. In fact, not only is it inevitable, but it's already in your organization, especially with the digital natives and the mindset that they have. That you know, that we live in a shared conversation, and crowdsourcing is just a recognition that exists. So why don't we use it?
Yeah, get in front of it. Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So now, you knew I was going to ask this question at one point anyways, right? Because we're forward looking and forward thinking. So I am going to ask you guys to look into your respective crystal balls. Are you guys looking? Yeah. So describe to me what crowdsourcing will look like in business, potentially, at the end of the decade. So let me offer an example. So when you take a look at how digital marketing disrupted traditional marketing efforts, I mean, there was new roles that were created. Who would have thought 20 years ago there would be social media managers and heads of digital marketing within organizations? And that could go on. So with that example in mind, what's possible for crowdsourcing in business over the next 10 years? And the other way to look at that is this. I mean, we have conversations with organizations, and some are further ahead in crowdsourcing and are a lot quicker to adapt, and others are a little bit further behind. And oftentimes that is part and parcel to the leadership. What do you see some organizations really doing well to get ahead of that? And where are some organizations kind of lagging? And what's that difference? Maybe that's a good place to look. Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll just jump in quickly in here. So crystal ball, having that in your hands is a bit hard these days, given you there's so much going on. But I would say that when I look at, for example, like how digital marketing has disrupted the traditional marketing, and we've started seeing like a new job roles like a social
Mhm.
media manager, and we started seeing like a digital account manager, and we started seeing the all other types of position. Here, I really see that we really need to have a more like a beyond the chief innovation officers like taking in helm with this, having also like a chief crowdsourcers or a chief transparent officers, because crowdsourcing is really related to transparency. And I think if an organization is not willing to really take that route, it's hard to really embrace it holistically in their organization. Now, there are some major players in our space, like the Lionbridge and APAN and PlanView. These are like the giants in the space who are really doing and acquiring other crowdsourcing companies and offering crowdsourcing solutions across different fields. But I think through this type of consolidation and with the organization like this, who really like now making really big bets and going not just after Facebooks and Amazon, because these guys, they're really doing it in many ways, but going the other organizations who really there's a huge potential to really bring this forward. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot of those organizations starting to really work and bring this forward. And I think there's a huge opportunity for also a platform like TopCoder and HeroX going beyond and then working with also like the small and medium-sized organizations, I would say.
Thanks for that, Epi. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say like, so today, like we help in some of our clients, kind of do workforce transformation. Like how do they look at using external crowds, not just TopCoder, but even other crowdsourcing platforms to get, and how does that affect their organization? I think the most successful ones kind of set up like a center of excellence internally. But I think looking at the future, I don't know what the right job titles would be, but I would imagine that just the whole team dynamic switches and what companies will invest in. Like the idea of you being necessarily like an expert in some narrow spot, I think is going to go away inside of a company. And that if you will be more of an expert on that company's differential, what makes them different, what makes them special, and that you can then go to a crowd to get very specific talent around all the surround and all the things that might be very specialized and that you need, but you and your company's teams will be focused on really excelling your company, excelling your differentiators, and that your teams will scale or right size based on the project, the skill sets, the needs. So I think the idea of like a company having huge teams will be much different. Like it'll be much more dynamic and size changing. And I think on the employee side, as the gig economy is growing fast as it is, one thing I'd love to see is like, how do we solve like the health and wealth problems? Like what are the platforms that can go out there and help health insurance or 401ks and on the people that become the kind of single stream experts that then can deliver their skills across a variety of businesses. I think that is interesting to me, like what kind of platforms and roles evolve around supporting those people.
Yeah,
well,
great points.
I just want to add to this, like think about, for example, what cloud computing did on the storage side of things. And I think I was watching a documentary about the Amazon, and it's interesting when Amazon Web Services started, there was this for 7 years, no one was really playing on this field. And it was really a miracle in a way. And they were just really banking a lot, because what they did is that they provided the storage on demand. And I think that we really have this huge opportunity to really transform the landscape of the internet, how it's done today. I mean, Chris and I, we've done this open letter that we put this data where pretty much like, what you have this what was that, the Psy, the one like Gangnam Style. The video was watched like over 3 billion views, I think. Like it had like a collective hours, I think like over 200 million collective hours. That really translates to like a 20 Empire State buildings that could have built with those hours. We're not talking about the whole internet. We're talking about just one video. So think about like the whole internet, the way how people are using it, like on the entertainment side of things, on the e-commerce side of things, and if we can really translate just 10% of the cognitive surplus that is spent on the internet and turn it into this like on-demand workforce, or in the end, crowdsourcing is not necessarily just paid; it's also unpaid. Because people really follow and they come together for a common interest. So when you come for a common interest, you don't necessarily think to get paid, because you come because you believe in that particular interest. So I think if we can really do this thing like what really Amazon did with Amazon Web Services for on those days, and now like every organization like really needs a cloud computing, and now you have like also like a Google's and all the other companies have really joined this, Microsoft joining this marketplace of the cloud computing. I think this is really massive.
That's great. Great point, Seppi.
Yeah, thank you.
What I'd like to do now is just leave just a few minutes to take some questions from our audience. We have a couple of really good ones here that we'll get into, but time permitting, what I'd like to do is loop back to you guys for just a 30-second kind of final thought. So give some thought to what that might look like for you guys.
Hey, Cal, can I buy a vowel? I'd like to buy a vowel, please.
Well, all right, go for it.
Okay. You.
Go for it, Mr. Catacini. What do you got for us?
That was it. That was my bad joke.
Is that what you
I'm the dad joke whisperer. Just ask my kids. So
then should I be like the Vanna White and start turning things around over here maybe?
I feel like I don't know if you guys watched the ESPN sports reporters, and they always had the kind of corny potting shot was the last thing. And I don't know, I have to come up with something a little bit good there.
Maybe I should put that in as part of your guys' prep and give some thought to some corny jokes. But see, if you're Christian, it just comes so naturally.
Yep, like farting.
There you go. So here's a great first question, actually. How do each of you work together? Curious on where your paths crossed. So we'll just take that as an open-ended kind of question to you guys.
Like
well,
us?
I can jump in because I think we're kind of we're like the meat in the sandwich a little bit.
Yeah.
But so HeroX is a general purpose crowdsourcing platform for knowledge workers. So we've deliberately organized ourselves to be a matchmaking and connecting platform. And as we kind of scale that out, we're going to be, wider and wider and thinner, a mile wide and an inch deep. And so now that's not what knowledge work looks like. It doesn't look an inch deep. There's deep pools of expertise, and there's domains that require a lot of specific expertise to engage crowdsourcing properly. TopCoder is and they're a partner of ours, and it's a great platform specifically targeting, coding and data science and having a community of engaged innovators and a domain-specific structure and set of best practices for how to do crowdsourcing, in their kind of common use cases. That's something that HeroX we're never going to do. We're never going to figure that out. Our job is to connect everybody. And so we bring kind of part of it, and we rely on partners like TopCoder to bring that depth of expertise for clients who have a problem in that domain. And then Epi is just good looking, so we just keep him around for looks. No, I'm kidding. No, and
not
Epi,
good looking. You're kidding.
Epi is a visionary who has I've really resonated with and enjoyed connecting with, and having the audacity to quit his day job and start Crowdsourcing Week and go out and, talk about this future, when he started it, it was a crazy idea. I mean, it was crazy. It's still a little crazy. Back then it was really crazy. So it took a lot of courage, for Epi to do that. He's still got a bit of a nervous, tick every once in a while from, I think, those years. But that vision is really important, that we have visionaries like that, that are just, never-ending evangelists for that, helping spread the word and the message. So we collaborate with Epi on a lot of different things, supporting his events, getting the word out, doing content, a lot of project opportunities Epi, lands, and we collaborate on that, and TopCoder. So that's kind of how we collaborate from my standpoint.
And the tick is probably too much caffeine. That's gonna be my educated guess.
It could be. Could be.
So I'm gonna ask this next question as well, because like I said, I do want to leave some about a minute for each of you guys for a final thought. How many of your answers, especially the ones that are forward-looking, are quite simply guesses? Do you base your forward thinking on data or stats? Just curious. Dave, want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think guesses, definitely. I think we do try to look at a lot of our data. And the other thing, I think we also have this whole crowd behind us that we actually spend a lot of time asking our own members, what do you think is going to happen? Where should we go? What should happen? Our clients, kind of pile on with what Christian said. Like, we spend a lot of time partnering with other crowd platforms like HeroX and what they're looking at, or what Epi brings together with the Crowdsourcing Week with, both clients, practitioners, platforms. So I think it is a lot of guess with anything, I think, in the future, but that, having the power of, probably collectively well over 2 million, 3 million people behind our collective platforms, it does help direct us in the right direction.
That's a great point.
So
I think I'll probably, there's no need to add anything on what you guys said, but I think on top of it is I see when you are in the exponential, when you're facing the exponential growth, relying on the historical data does not make sense. But you need to rely on the real-time data, and that's what real-time feedback is the most important thing.
Yeah, because when you're creating disruption, you're forward-looking. It doesn't exist yet. Yeah, absolutely. So, gentlemen, what I'd like to do now is we've talked around a lot of what the past decade has brought us, and some thoughts on what the future looks like, 10 years out, a few years out. And what I'd like to do is give each of you just a minute, and Christian, it's a minute, because I am going to pull out like the virtual hook. Just to offer, any final thoughts that we potentially didn't cover that you think would be meaningful for our audience. Again, when they forward look into what crowdsourcing can mean for them and their organizations in the coming decade.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Can I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, good. So, well, first off, it's a proven fact that scientists can't prove that time exists. So time is just a concept. Okay.
Noted.
So, yeah. Okay. But no, I'll use my time to add, to just go back to that earlier question, because I think it's really insightful. And again, I could probably write a mini book about it. But I think the key to being a change maker, being an entrepreneur and successful is fact-based visioning. To have the ability to really look at the facts, both the ones that support your view and especially the ones that don't support your view, and then build a vision, a hypothesis, you could call it if you wanted to get all sciencey about that, and then have the courage to live in a tension between as the facts change and grow, what's the hypothesis that points to, and what's the vision of the company, and then keeping those two in as straight a line as possible. And it's hard to do, and it's something that I would say is a little bit of my superpower is doing that. HeroX is my 4th startup, and knock on wood, everyone's been a success, and they've all been hard, and they've all been disruptive innovation, and not understood at the beginning and then seen as self-evident at the end, which I think is how a lot of things happen. So I think facts are, and I just have a big, I'm a big fact. I'm hot and bothered about facts nowadays. I don't know if you've noticed what's going on out there. So I think facts and as a species being committed to facts is actually really important, because if a species is not committed to or doesn't have access to facts, also known as reality, things don't end well for them. Just go back in history and look. So I think it's an insightful question, and I would argue that behind a lot of at least what I'm talking about, there's a good body of evidence and knowledge, and I try to calibrate my conviction, but what I say to the level of support that in the facts that we've discovered, and the heuristics and the empirical experience that we've discovered, because we don't want to ever be really wrong, because it's hard to please our clients and to create a great success rate if we ever are really wrong.
Got it. Thanks, Christian. That's a great final point. Gentlemen, who wants to jump in next?
Well, I can add something to this, and I just want to really get people thinking about the possibilities, right? Because sometimes, we find our ways that we get stuck, and then we look in terms of the things that we do it, and all of a sudden there's no passion behind it. Without passion, nothing happens great, right? So we want to do things great, and I think one way to look at it is like asking questions, what if and why we're doing it, right? So I put this in the context. Let's say we brought a man and a moon with 100,000 people working collectively, right? Panama Canal with 100,000 people working collectively. Actually, in ancient times, like in Egypt, the pyramids were built with collectively 100,000 people. So what can we do? What if we bring 1 million people to really do something great? And I think this is the type of level of commitment that we need to really make. And I think we need people who are really passionate to really make that big difference, and not just talking about it, because talk is cheap. So I think that's what I like to really put that into the action. Forget about the artificial intelligence. Make that action intelligence the most important thing.
Talk is cheap. Love it. I'm going to quote you on that.
Yeah, you can.
Dave, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm having a hard time framing it as a parting shot, but I'll come up with something. So I think first of all, I just want to say thanks for including me. It was a pleasure to talk with the three of you and have the crowd and the questions from the crowd. So thanks for that. I think I actually kind of want to pile on the passion. I mean, that's one thing, like even crowdsourcing to a degree, I wonder like how much that term sticks. I know I've been seeing a lot of the passion economy from different people, and I think that'll be interesting. I think to me, the parting shot to people listening and watching this is let's not wait for the millennials. I've been in this space for too long now. I don't know if I have another 10 years for them to get into management before everyone wildly adopts this. But I think, if you look at any innovation, like being the person that has that strategic home to host and push that forward, like that's a spot. If you're excited or interested, like if you can help drive that, I think you'll see not only massive benefit for you personally, but massive benefit for your company, for, like Epi and Christian said, even the world, right? Like what's going to happen. So I'd put, I guess, a little crowdsourcing challenge back out to the people watching it is like, dip a toe in and you know, try to drive it yourself, I think you'll see it's not only is it extremely fun, but it's just it's definitely world changing.
That's a wonderful final thought. I really appreciate that. And, you know, I would echo all of you and say, you know, passion is the key driver. And I would say that I have a tremendous amount of respect for each and every one of you being a thought leader in an environment which is cutting edge, if you will. You know, it's everything always looks like it's a massively brilliant idea, hindsight. But when you're in the front and you're forging ahead and creating that space, it can be challenging, and you question yourself on any given day. Am I really crazy? Is this the route that it should be going? But when you're surrounded by individuals and ideas and organizations that are full of this passion and you continue to uncover it, for me personally, that's why I jump out of bed every single day. And I work around the clock, oftentimes weekends, much to the chagrin of my family, but I see that passion. And when you see it in front of you, I have it that it is the right place to be. And I'm super excited to see where all of this takes us over the next few years and decade. And again, I have tremendous amount of respect for each of your guys' thoughts and opinions, being thought leaders in the space. And I really appreciate you taking your time out of your extremely busy schedules today to participate in this webinar. For those of you who are attending today's webinar, if you'd like to learn more about how you can leverage the power of the crowd within your innovation strategies, reach out to us directly, schedule in a complimentary educational workshop. And with that, on behalf of Dave, Effie, Christian, and I, thanks so very much for taking the time to join us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Cal. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.